The first thing you want to do is kind of orient yourself. How the heck, where's top and bottom and front and back? So all of the hearts have one area that's kind of like a blunt cone. So if this were in my chest, it'd be right in the center of my chest, and the tip, what's called the apex of the heart, will be tilted at an angle so that it's pointing towards my left hip. So it's kind of right in the mediastinum, but occupies a little bit more of the left side of your chest than the right side. The portion that's got all the pipes and the tubes sticking out of it, that's what these things are. These are large vessels going into and out of the heart. Those are going to be the various vessels we need to look at. These little flaps are extensions off of the left atrium and the right atrium. They're called auricles. And another name for the part of your ear that sticks off is sometimes called the auricle or the pinna of the ear. So these are called the auricles of the atria, the little extensions that can swell out like a balloon that's deflated right now. Okay, if we undo the rubber band, by the way, those lines on it just meant it got packed and shipped sort of in a funny way. Let's see how good this heart is. That's not too bad. Okay, so when the heart is open, spread out like this, you're looking at the posterior portion of the heart. There are 4 chambers. One, here's a flap or a valve over here, that thin little membrane. So above that membrane is a chamber. So there's a chamber down here, there's a chamber here, there's a chamber there, and here's another flap with a bunch of strings attached, another chamber up there. Some of it got cut off the back when the heart was taken out of the animal's chest. Which chamber is the left ventricle? This one here? See how thick the walls are? So you found the left ventricle. Now you know that this has to be the right ventricle. Above the right ventricle has to be the right atrium. Above the left ventricle has to be the left atrium. So you've just oriented yourself to that heart. If you would get a section of the heart, that would be the front portion. You have to kind of reorient yourself, but there's left ventricle, here's right ventricle, above it would be left atrium, and above it, over on this side where that flap would be up way up here, would be the right atrium. So it's just kind of a mirror image because it was the front of the heart. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the pathway of blood flow, but on a lot of these hearts, some of the larger vessels have been whacked off or they were cut off at the slaughterhouse, so they may be a bit difficult to find. So in order to find some of the vessels, here's a right ventricle, here's a right atrium. We know that the vessel that feeds blood into the right atrium has to be the vena cava, number 1. So if you stick your fingers up into the right atrium, you're going to come out somewhere. There we are. I just stuck my finger out the vena cava. So here's where the blood would come in to the right ventricle. So if I stick my finger in that opening, ta-da, it just came out in the right atrium. So now that I've got a vena cava right atrium, that first valve with the strings attached is the tricuspid. We go into the right ventricle, which is down here. When that right ventricle squeezes or compresses to pump blood out, it would shut that valve so blood can't go back up here. Now we have to come and follow the right ventricle and see where it comes out. So if I take my finger and shove it way up, can you see my finger? Oh, I need something longer, my finger won't fit all that way. I'll take a probe. Put a probe way up high into the right ventricle, follow it along, and voila, I just came out the pulmonary trunk. Right there. And then that pulmonary trunk would split into pulmonary arteries, go to the lungs, and then come back to the left side. Here's the back of the heart again. Here's the left atrium. So there's a hole in the back of the left atrium. There's where the pulmonary veins would come in. To a left atrium, this big flap with the strings attached to it here would be the bicuspid or mitral valve. There's the left ventricle. When it squeezes to push blood into your body, it shuts the bicuspid. This big tube is the aorta. And in the aorta, just right where the left ventricle ends, there are little flaps right here that look like the pockets on my lab coat without strings attached. And there is an aortic semilunar valve. So the semilunar valves do not have any strings attached to them. They're very thin little membranes. They're just a double layer of endocardium, the membrane that lines the inside of the heart. They're very thin but amazingly resilient. And then this thick-walled tube is part of the aorta. It's nice, it kind of got cut right open. So this little pulmonary semilunar valve, or aortic semilunar valve, doesn't have any strings attached, but it works really well. Pretend that I am a heart on the left side. If the left ventricle were down there, and up here is going to be the aorta, and here's the aortic semilunar valve, when the heart squeezes and compresses blood, it flattens out that valve, pushes it down flat so the blood can easily get out of the aorta. But when that heart chamber stops squeezing and begins to relax, what is that blood going to try to do? Go right back where it came. And when it hits those valves, pops them open, and then the valve shuts and won't let the blood go back in. Meanwhile, the left ventricle will fill with blood again, and when it squeezes and the pressure gets the same pressure as it is above it, It'll push, pop those valves down, blood comes out, and you'll feel that on your pulse. That wave of pressure that the heart generates is what you feel when you feel a pulse. All right, so these hearts are here for you guys to look at. Most of them I've tried to cut right through the middle, so there's an anterior and a posterior portion. You're welcome to look at them. Keep the parts together so that when you're done looking at one of these hearts, you can just rubber band it back together, throw them back in the bag, tie a rubber band on it, we'll leave them here. So there's really no need for you guys to get knives out. You're probably just a blunt probe in your fingers are the best thing to do. So on the lab exam, I'll have a heart like this out and some pins holding it open so you can see everything. I might say, stick a pin in here, name this chamber, left ventricle. Name the vessel that this chamber would pump blood into. Even if you can't see it, you know that it has to go into the aorta. Or name the valve that the blood would have to go through on its way to the next vessel. Aortic semilunar. Name these string-like structures. Those would be chordae tendineae. Name these, here now we're in the atrium. See those nice muscular ridges in there? Those are pectinate muscles that are in there. So I can point to those. So those 20 things that we listed would be the names of the structures. If I pointed right here, name that wall. You're between the ventricles, so interventricular septum. So 20 things to know. There's more detail on some of the models and the charts of smaller things, but only those 20 things. 4 chambers, 4 valves, 4 vessels in and out, 4, what else did I have? Walls, and then the 4 inner features, 1 up in the atrium and 3 down the ventricles, 20 things. So you guys can come back in here on your own time, play with these hearts whenever they're available, stick your fingers in them and get your probes in them, and when you're done, just rinse off the tray with warm soapy water, leave it against the sink, and we'll put those away and put them back up for other people to use. All right. You guys are welcome to stay and work for a little while. If this has been enough for one night,